Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining the ADBI featured speaker webinar. We're happy to welcome Professor Nick Bloom today, who is from Stanford University, and he will talk about the future of working from home. And he's been one of the most active researchers on this topic, with a recent publication in Nature as well. So yeah, over to you, Nick. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Tony. So before I start, let's see this works. I was going to post. Let's see if this will work. I was going to post my slides to. Oh, did everyone get the chat? So
Yes,
here are the slides. If anyone wants the slides, you'll work. I'm an academic, so there's no intellectual property on this. So please, okay. I'll go through them. But if you want any slides, so I'll now go ahead. Also, we have about an hour, just under an hour. I have about 30 minutes of material, so I'll stop and have a lot of time for Q&A at the end. But if anyone wants to ask a question during, it's like nice for me to take a break. So if you want to ask a question, feel free to unmute, just say it. I'm not going to watch the chat, but if anyone would like to ask a question, please feel free to go ahead. Because I was assuming, so I'll talk about the future of work from home. Just move this. Here we go. So I'm just going to hide my floating meeting controls. Here we go. So as I mentioned earlier, weirdly, I've been working on this since 2004. It was not very exciting. I'll turn up my sound. It was not very exciting until 2020. I did get to meet President Obama back in 2014, which was fantastic. He's very impressive, but otherwise it's very quiet. And then in 2020, it just went crazy. So I'm going to just give you a summary. It's kind of exec ed level. It's a very practical summary of data. And I'll talk about three different things. One is current state of working from home. It'll be somewhat US focused, but I have some international data. Second is on thoughts on managing hybrid and remote. And finally, some impacts on the economy. So here's data for the US. I start with that just to give you a sense of the transition, where we've come from, where we've gone to. So before the pandemic, if you look here, pre-COVID, in the US, about 5% of full paid days will work from home. This is pretty similar for Canada, for Northern Europe, bit lower for Asia, bit lower for Southern Europe. But before the pandemic, wherever you were, very few people work full days from home. It happened, but it was very rare. Go to the beginning of the pandemic, which in North America was summer 2020, April, May 2020. Anyone that could work from home did. So I was fully remote. Pretty much all of Stanford was fully remote. Pretty much all my friends, colleagues were fully remote. It dropped back down. And the key thing to see is from about the beginning of 2023, it's really stopped falling. So it is, it's asymptoting out at about 25%. But one critical thing when I talk to companies, organizations, not-for-profits, whatever, is to say, now things are very stable. So if you want to predict next year, you want to predict 2026, where we are now is a pretty good bet. We're kind of in a post-pandemic stable phase. You can also see it. Another way to see this is just look at swipe card data. So this is for North American offices from Castle. So every time you go into the office, you swipe in and they record the number of unique swipes each day. So C3M goes in and out of the building 8 times. He's recorded once for that day. If he works from home all day, it's a 0. This shows occupancy relative to February 2020. So relative to pre-pandemic. And it shows you really the same story. So beginning of the pandemic, occupancy rates fell to 15%. Pretty much everyone was working from home. Offices were totally empty. Offices have slowly been filling up. Beginning of 2023, they kind of moved sideways. So North America, Northern Europe, I know less about Asia, but certainly over the last year and a half, it's been stable. So there really hasn't been any change now for about a year and a half. Here's international data. We're actually running another survey wave this summer. This is for last summer. What you can see here, and I've also seen it in office occupancy data from JLL, is there's kind of 3 groups. So first group's English speaking. So US, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand tend to have relatively high levels of work from home. Typically, people are working from home about 2 days a week. Then you look at Europe and South America. You're looking at more about 1 day a week, slightly higher in Northern Europe, slightly lower in Southern Europe. Then you go to Asia, and Asia, it's down to more like 0.7, 0.6, 0.8 days a week. When I've talked to JLL or CBRE or other big multinationals, they tell me very similar stories. If you look at offices, they're still half empty in much of Canada and the US. They're kind of somewhat fuller in Europe, and in Asia is where they're closest to. They're not completely back to pre-pandemic levels, but often they say they're kind of 80, 90% full. So another key fact is in developed economies, even in developed economies, so even in Europe and the US, most people actually can't work from home at all. So again, in the US, about 60% of people cannot work from home at all. They work in McDonald's, they work in security, transport, retail, manufacturing, hospitals, teaching, my kids' schools. They're going in every day. They tend to be the lowest paid employees. There's then a group here, which I think is probably all ADB staff, is all faculty in Stanford, most staff professionals in Stanford are hybrid. They are typically in the office maybe 3 days a week, kind of average. They're professionals, graduates. If I look at my students in Stanford, they're mostly going to end up here, hybrid. And then there's about 10% that are fully remote. Who are these folks? They're kind of mostly things like call centers, payroll, data entry, IT support. They're kind of mid to low level jobs. There are some people like journalists, some coders. Airbnb has a lot of fully remote, but it's mostly kind of mid-level jobs. So most professionals, managers, people that I teach at Stanford, my MBAs, they pretty much all end up in this hybrid bucket. And I'll talk mostly about this for ADB and for most organizations I talk to. This is the thing they're really struggling. So Stanford, just to give you a sense, we have 20,000 employees across the university and the two hospital systems. About 10,000 come in every day. They sit here, they're fully on site, food service, janitorial, cleaning, security, nurses. About 8,000 are hybrid. So me and many of the professional staff, senior managers in the university, we have about 2,000 fully remote employees. These are like payroll, things like that. So Stanford University looks pretty standard actually to many big organizations. It varies a lot by industry. So if you read in the newspaper, or on TV or online, it's always talking about work from home in tech, but that's because tech is a total outlier. So Amazon, Microsoft, Google, yes, they're really fascinating, and yes, we love to write, media stories about them, but they're not typical. So tech, and then ADB probably, I'm not sure where you'd sit, where Stanford would sit, but finance, insurance, professional business services, you probably likely want, best fit to one of these occupations. They have very high levels of work from home. If you look at the other end, hospitality, food services, think McDonald's, KFC, transport, warehousing, they're very low. And the reason is people just have to go in every day. And, years ago, I worked in McKinsey and I spent 6 months in retail. And even if you're not on the front line in retail, if you're managing, the people you're managing are in store every day. So you pretty much have to go in store. And so even in, retail, there's relatively low levels of work from home. Happy to pause if there are any questions, actually. I'll just take a drink of water. If anyone has a question, please unmute and feel free to ask.
I should also add that for the audience, you have access to the Q&A box. So if you write your questions there, we can get to them either in middle of the conversation or at the end.
Yeah, Danny, if you're in, please feel free to read them out.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the ADBI office at this stage?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, please go ahead, Nick.
Okay, so feel free to stop me. I know it feels very rude to interrupt, but it's not on Zoom. There's different rules on Zoom. So feel free just to unmute and shout out a question. Anyone that teaches MBAs, if you don't have a question every 30 seconds, you feel like everyone's, it's quiet. So there's also a big difference over the life cycle. So here we do levels of desired work from home, and it looks similar to actual work from home over age. So what you see here is early 20-somethings tend not to be relatively less keen on work from home. If I think of my students that come out of Stanford, I actually polled my class of seniors. So these are 20, 21-year-olds. And I said, how many days do you want to work from home? And on average, they wanted to work from home 1 day a week. And when I spoke to them, they said, well, what do you expect? We want to socialize. It's more fun going into the office. We want to mentor. We want to learn. And it's easier to do that face to face. And they said, our apartments are tiny. Like, who'd want to, there's 5 of us sharing an apartment in New York. Well, I don't want to work from home in my bedroom. Where am I going to go during the day? There is no space. So people in their early 20s tend to be less keen. As people go into their 30s and certainly 40s, you see much higher levels of work from home. Typically, this is, imagine someone aged 39, they have 2 young children. They have maybe a larger apartment or a house. They're living further away with a long commute. And they have been working in the same professional role for, 10, 15 years. They're much keener to work from home. So you see a life cycle, early on, not so keen. As you get to 30s, 40s, people really want it. Then, I'm 51, you start to get into 50s, 60s. You start to see that people's preferences start to be to return to the office. Their children have left the house. They're often more senior and they want to come back in. So interesting enough, this often causes real issues for firms. When I talk to companies, CEOs often are here, the heads of the companies. They're saying, look, the new hires, they want to come in and get mentored and be social, but the middle managers, the people that need to be doing that mentoring, don't want to come in. So leadership often has a real struggle getting the middle of the organizations in, because these are the people in their 30s, 40s that want to work from home. So why has hybrid become so dominant? Why did I mention that 30% of people are hybrid? Before the pandemic, that was close to 0. So I've got 30% of the workforce, probably pretty much everyone that's listening, that is working from home 2, 3, maybe even 4 days a week. Well, the 2 big reasons for this are around happiness and productivity. And I'll talk about them. I'm not really going to talk about space and talent because it doesn't matter as much, but these are the big 2. So why don't I go through them? So happiness, first fact is, employees really like hybrid. So we've polled around the world in multiple waves, and people report they value the ability to work from home 2 or 3 days a week about as much as an 8%, even 10% pay increase. So it seems a lot of money. You think, really? 8%, 10%? But if you step back, you think about it. If you can work from home 2, 3 days a week, you are saving maybe 4 or 5 hours a week on commuting and, getting ready, dressing, shaving, etc. for work. You can live further away. There's a lot of benefits. It's less tiring, less exhausting. You have to pay for less transport. So maybe it's, not that surprising. It's a really valuable perk. In fact, when I talk to recruiters in the US, they say, the big things people ask about now are pension plans, healthcare plans, and work from home. Those are the big 3. So it's definitely a really important benefit. When I talk to companies, I say, look, if you're against work from home, you've got to think it cuts employees' productivity by at least 8% to make it worth paying them 8% more to get them in. And that almost is never true. So, hybrid is stuck because of this. Employees value it so much. It's really valuable for employees. It cuts quit rates, makes it easier to hire. And as a result, it turns out to be profitable for firms. So in fact, I put out a paper just end of last week in Nature, where we ran a large randomized control trial on 1,612 engineers, marketing, and finance professionals in Trip.com. So, one of the big 3 global travel agents. This was based in Shanghai. Trip is NASDAQ listed. They're worth, I think, about $20 billion. They have 40,000 employees. They're a massive company with very, modern, professional-looking offices. They look like anything you'd see in, London or San Francisco, New York. What we did is, for 2 divisions, we took everyone, and anyone with an odd birthday, so if you're born on the 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th of the month, you got to work from home on Wednesday and Friday. And if you had an even birthday, you're born on the 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th of the month, you had to go in all 5 days. So then the question is, we did this for 6 months. We then followed up for another 2 years. The question is, what happened? So if you look at, my post on LinkedIn, the first thing is there was just no impact on performance, none. Nothing positive, nothing negative. We looked at so many different performance metrics, gradings, promotions, innovation outcomes, development, leadership, lines of code, about half of them are coders, a range of business metrics. There's just no impact. So you may think, look, work from home is bad because people are in the office less. This was only 2 days a week, to be careful, but maybe being at home 2 days a week reduces face time and mentoring. Creativity maybe is harder. That's possibly true. Set against that, you're at home 2 days a week, so you have less commuting, so you're less tired, and it's quieter at home. And it seems that those things kind of roughly netted out. The other big finding is employees really liked it. liked it a lot in various surveys. And probably the most important single number is this: quit rates fell by 35%. And Trip.com said every person that quits costs us about $20,000 because we've got to go out, we've got to advertise, we've got to do first round interviews, we've got to do second round interviews, we've got to get them into the office, we've got to run them through a training program, we've got to get them up to speed. They say it's just really expensive to have turnover. And so they looked at the results of this and said, this is massively profitable for the business. It has no impact on productivity. We maybe save a bit of space, and it saves millions of dollars from reducing recruitment and retention costs. And so at the end of the experiment, they rolled it out to the whole company. And in fact, a number of other Chinese tech firms have now copied it.
Okay. May I?
Yeah, go ahead. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. So with this comparison about the quit rate is after controlling for the difference in the salary or wage.
Yes, a great question. So this was a randomized control trial. So we have 800 people that were randomly picked to work from home and 800 that were randomly not. So those two groups are basically the same. But it's a very good point to ask. What happens if you look into subgroups? What you find is the groups with the largest impact were female employees. So women saw reductions in quit rates of 50%. So men saw about 20% and women are about 50%. People that lived a long way from the office, which is maybe not surprising, and non-managers. So non-managers, women and long commute people saw big reductions. The only group that did not see large reductions were managers. So managers were like, they were actually skeptical. In advance, we surveyed them at the beginning, before the experiment started. They predicted it would reduce productivity by 2.6%. So kind of negative. At the end of the experiment, so 6 months later, we resurveyed the same managers and they went from minus 2.6 to plus 1. So managers were initially skeptical. At the end of the 6 months, they kind of said, it hasn't been that bad. I don't love it, but I'm perfectly happy and put up with it. And then non-managers, which are 3/4 of the employees, were very happy.
Maybe the employer would try to reduce the salary while allowing the working from home. So eventually the quit rate becomes similar between two groups.
Yeah, as economists, in a sense, there's money on the table. So, here's the way to think about it. I, as a firm, can do something that has no effect on me, and you, as an employee, value the same as an 8% pay increase. So now there's kind of 8%, but gain between us. How do we split that? It depends on bargaining. And, I think in the long run, what's going to happen is salaries will drop, but they won't drop fully by 8%. They may drop by 4%. So employees are happier. They've got a small pay reduction, but a massive increase in benefits. And employers are happier because they're more profitable. That's probably where things will end up, actually. As a bigger picture, pretty fascinating. In the US, particularly, and in Canada, there's been a big increase in labor supply. And I think this is one of the factors. If you look at, I've been doing some research on where the increase in labor supplies come from, and it's particularly women and people with a disability, who are the people most like to benefit from that. That's actually kept wage inflation lower than it would otherwise be. So oddly enough, if you're Jerome Powell, one of the reasons inflation hasn't been so high, it's been high, it's hit 10%, but it hasn't been higher and has come down relatively fast, is the labor supply has gone up. And I think this is one of the reasons. People have got this benefit and their wages have not risen quite as fast, but they certainly haven't risen by, by 8% less than others. So it's kind of odd. I think it's relevant for monetary policy. It's a strange thing, but this is kind of monetary policy relevant in terms of bigger growth effects.
Thank you.
Before I forget, the other policy area I've had some discussion on we're doing research on now relative to ADB is on fertility rates. I don't have anything on this, but we talked for a while to the South Korean government. So my co-author in much of this work, Steve Davis, his wife is from South Korea, and him and I separately have been having quite a lot of discussions. And I think this will be very, very relevant also for Japan, China, much of East Asia in particular, very low birth rates, that if you look at the groups that are particularly positive on it, it's typically people with young children, particularly female employees with young children. We've been collecting survey data in the US and asking people how many children they intend to have. And even if you control for age and education and income and how many children you currently have and everything industry, it looks like people that can work from home plan to have about 1/4 more child on average, which is a lot. So I think another big picture, long run policy implication is demographics and long run increasing fertility rate. So I think for Asia, that's in some ways, oddly, maybe the biggest long run gain will be to try and reduce some of the demographic issues. But I wasn't going to talk about that. We're kind of working on that because that's going to take a long time to show up. So part of the complexity is it wasn't until this year people come convinced that work from home's here to stay. And if you're planning on family size, it just takes many years to happen. But my guess is by 27, 28, we'll start to see material impacts on birth rates because of this. Okay, so
may I interrupt?
Go ahead.
I want to just dwell on this point a little bit more because you brought it up. Japanese government has policy after making babies, they give cash award. Would working from home be a better policy than to pay money after having made babies? This in terms of fertility. So this may be an interesting question to ask in your research. Which is a more meaningful government policy intervention?
No, it's a great question. The Economist. I mean, my knowledge of the literature is the kind of elasticity of kids with respect to tax incentives is incredibly low. So the numbers I've seen is it costs about $1 million to persuade someone to have an extra. I mean, incredibly expensive. And it's not also clear the people that respond to that margin are necessarily the people you want having extra kids. So if you think of who's responding to that money, there's some concerns over policies to pay people to have kids. Work from home strikes me as probably far, far, far cheaper. I mean, like 100th the cost. And if you think of who's responding at that margin, it may well be the reverse. It may be exactly the people you want to be having more kids, which is, professionals that are, that you think it would be exactly, people who like to make good parents, but who are just busy working in long, high pay, but tough jobs. And if you allow them a lot.
That okay?
Okay.
This is a shock. This is a bad thing.
Nick, we lost you a bit.
Oh, sorry. I was about to say, a lot of it is, it's my internet. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know what it is. I could blame Stanford University. So a lot of it is not just women working from home, it's men. They're equally important. In fact, when we look at the statistical analysis, you see for both men and women, it really matters what their partner is. I mean, for obvious reasons, that if you and your partner can both work from home 2 days a week, you have much more flexibility in one or the other. So if I were the Japanese government, I was worried about fertility rates, I would, promote it. I would also promote it very much in the federal government. I mean, the one place the government can control is its own employees and kind of norm set. It also helps on congestion, cost of living. People can move out. I'll come back to the end. It strikes me there's one part of the world that should really adopt work from home. It's East Asia. And there's one part of the world that hasn't. It's East Asia. So as an economist, it seems like such an obvious policy for East Asia because, yeah.
I think, can I add to one more question? For your working from home research, did you also factor in sort of flexibility? You mentioned flexibility is important, and also flexibility in terms of time, because Mitsubishi, there's a think tank that belongs to Mitsubishi Bank, and they recently released a report which says that sort of flexibility in time actually is most beneficial for women making a decision to have second baby. And I think it's very important as well. So because working from home, it also contains many other sort of changes in the styles of life. So does your research also cover that kind of aspect?
Yeah, great question. So yes, definitely. So I'll give you multiple answers. So one is even before the pandemic, people used to talk about flexi place with flexi times. They tend to go together. When we survey people, we ask them, why do you like working from home? The number one reason is I don't like to commute. But number two is time flexibility. So that's a big deal. In fact, in the trip.com study, not in the Nature paper, the Nature paper was short, but we had an MBR working paper, which was much longer. we looked at how much time people work per day. And it turns out on the Wednesdays and Fridays, they work from home. They work about 2 hours less, and they work more time on the office days and on the weekends. So I asked them, what's going on? And they said, well, when I work from home, if I want to go to the dentist or see my children or go shopping or go play golf, whatever it is, I can do it because I'm at home. And I make up for it in the evening or on other days and on the weekends. And so you're exactly right. Work from home is really valuable for childcare, but actually other things, I'll show you a study on golf at the end. I don't even play golf, but it's clear that people that play golf, it's very hard to play golf on Saturday and Sunday. It's much easier on a Tuesday morning. So if you're working from home on Tuesday, you play golf in the morning and then, work in the evening. And my youngest is 8. So I definitely like to be home and go and pick up from, the school. So yeah, flexibility is a big deal, and it tends to go, they're kind of hand in hand with work from home. So I'll keep going. Again, please stop me if there's any other questions. So then productivity, this is where the big debate is. There's everyone from Elon Musk that says work from home is. So it's really important to split between.
We missed we are saying Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And
please remove from Elon.
Please.
You want this?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
What did Elon Musk say?
Oh, Elon Musk said, look, most of what Elon Musk says, I now disagree with. So, Elon Musk has gone honestly a little bit crazy, but Elon Musk says work from home is evil. He says it's morally evil. And I think he was frustrated that his employees weren't going back to the office and Elon Musk is sometimes smoking weed or drinking, who knows, but he says a lot of things. He's kind of well, actually, I don't want to get political, but there are other people, politicians, that tend to say a lot of crazy things. So Elon Musk is kind of like that. But there are other people that, like Jamie Dimon, who I respect a lot, the head of JP Morgan. David Solomon, actually spoke to David Solomon. These are, very impressive business leaders. They are kind of spoken out against work from home. So what does the evidence show? So there's 2 different things I talk about. One is fully remote on the left. This is when I work from home every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. What does the evidence show? There are a number of studies on this now. They're a bit of a mix. It depends how well managed it is, but on average, it's maybe minus 10%. So initially you think, why would my employer, Stanford University, have 2,000 people working from home if productivity is, say, 10% lower? And the reason is, for businesses in particular, the question is not about productivity, it's about profitability. So why are they different? Well, if I'm, say, a company and I have people working from home, A, I don't have to pay for their office space, so they're fully remote. So that saves me about 10% of costs. And B, I can hire them wherever I want. So if I'm living out in San Francisco, it costs me 20, 30% less to hire someone in Mississippi because it's a lot poorer. So if I'm a business in San Francisco, like Stanford, and I hire an IT support person in Mississippi, even if they're 10% less productive, they're 40% cheaper. So it turns out to be a really good deal. And a great example I had is I spoke to someone that ran taco restaurants in Los Angeles. And he said, everyone that's in the store, that's serving food, that's cooking, cleaning, has to be in person every day, day in, day out. He said, but the back office, the support staff, they've all gone fully remote. And he said, you know what? They're only about 80% as efficient, but they cost about 50% because I've moved the whole back office to Mexico. And so fully remote is not about productivity. It's really about profitability. So that's the best way to think about that. Yes, maybe it's a little bit less productive, but it's so much cheaper that it's quite appealing. Hybrid, I won't go through it all. Hybrid, it looks like it's about 0. You can imagine, if each of you think to yourself, if I work from home 1 or 2 days a week, am I less productive? Typically not. And that's what you see in the data. You're not more productive, but you're not less productive. So that's why kind of hybrid is just killed fully in person. The only thing the only strong advice is if you have professionals and managers that can work from home, it really makes no sense to get them in 5 days a week, particularly Friday. It makes employees so angry and so upset to have to come in Friday. they're like raging at the managers, and you don't get any more productivity. It just makes no sense. So when I talk to businesses, it's like, give up on Friday. Like you're just killing your business by doing this. And in America, in Canada, and most of Europe, Fridays are kind of dead at this point. So people are working, they're just working from home. After that, it's less obvious. And fully remote versus organized hybrid, there's a bit of, there's a trade-off here. So how would I manage it? So I think the single most important, there are two pieces of HR advice, and I give out a lot. This is one of them, and I'll come on to the other in a minute. So one of them is just the importance of coordination. So when we survey people, we ask, what are the top 3 benefits of working on your employer's business premises? Why would you ever want to come in? So to be clear, most people, the average person wants to come in 2-3 days a week. So it's not that everyone wants to be fully remote. Most people do want to come in 2-3 days a week. They just don't want to come in 5. When you say, why do you want to come in? They say socializing with co-workers or face-to-face collaboration. Not that many say time with my manager. Very few say, free food, the donuts, whatever it is. They basically want to see their co-workers and collaborate. So it means that, if I'm working with 3 other people, if I'm in on Monday and he's in on Tuesday and she's in on Wednesday, it makes no sense. We just come in on different days. So one thing is to pick the same days. I would say the most typical pattern I see is people coming in on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So some organizations just close the office on Friday, more or less. Monday's kind of quiet. They're coming in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So one important thing is coordination. Here's some days on, showing from the Flex Index, showing which days people come in. You get the sense that Friday's very quiet, Monday quietish, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are quite busy. This, by the way, is why it's hard. This is, by the way, is why it's hard to get rid of office space. So, it's not that easy to get rid of office space. I see the big benefit of work from home, at least hybrid, is about keeping employees happy, reducing turnover costs. It's less about saving office space. Fully remote saves your office space. Hybrid is a lot harder. So that's that's advice 1. In terms of offices themselves, I've seen generally this kind of stuff is going out. So cubicle land is really shrinking, because that was when people used to come and just sit in these cubicles day in, day out working. Nobody now is quietly working in a cubicle, really. They're tending to do that at home, or these kind of long corridors. What we see more of is conference rooms, small and large conference rooms and little meeting areas. So, Sitaram's in the office, he's in meetings for like 6-7 hours, but then between meetings, he's got a couple of hours whereby he wants to do some email, maybe have Zoom calls. So the typical office worker is in and out of a lot of meetings, because that's the reason you come in. You only really come in to see other people, but it's like too much. You can't do that hour in, hour out. You want to break. So people need kind of quiet spaces in between. So then the second piece of advice I end up giving out a lot is the importance of performance reviews. So again, this is relatively intuitive. When people are in the office, you can see what they're doing. So if I'm at the office, my boss can see it. Am I typing away at my computer? When they walk by, is Word or Excel or Python open, or am I watching Champions League or Netflix or something? It's kind of like you can see how well I'm working. Now, management by walking around is kind of 5 out of 10. I'm not claiming it's particularly good management, but you can kind of live with it. So a lot of organizations, the boss is like walking around, watching what's going on, and it kind of works. It's not great, but it's livable. As soon as people go home, you just can't see what they're doing. You just no idea what they're doing. So rather than measure inputs, you have to measure outputs. And so what this means is performance reviews. So there's been a big push towards more performance reviews. So for me, it would be like teaching, research, administration, just evaluating them regularly, typically every 6 months. And if I'm doing badly, getting tough, and if I'm doing well, continuing to support me. It turns out it's better for managers because they don't need to check in on people every 5 minutes. And it's better for employees. So coming back to the flexibility point earlier, if somebody is watching me every 5 minutes, I feel like I can't, make use of flexibility at home. If instead I'm told I just have to meet these deliverables, I can then, go spend an hour with my children and then make up for it in the evening. So, I would coordinate the same days. I would promote in-person activity when you're in the office, lunches, trainings. You might make people together in the office. If you have that, I'd probably start to get, suggest quiet reading, writing, data on home days, probably for company organizations, if you're promoting coordination, kind of get a bit tougher on attendance. At least Stanford is saying, look, if we have anchor days, we really want you in on those anchor days. On the work from home days, by all means, work from home. But if you're all going to come in as a group on Tuesday, Wednesday, it's kind of important everyone comes together. Because if there's 8 of us and one person works from home, we now got to get onto Zoom again to connect you in. And then probably for new hires, have an extra 1 or 2 days in the office. Happy to pause, take any questions before I go on. I've got about 5 more minutes of econ stuff, but happy to take any questions.
So in the Q&A box, there are a couple of questions on why East Asia has very low work from home, and is it mainly due to culture, or the image of being lazy if you work from home? So culture is not part of the 4 points that you had. What do you think about this explanation?
So, great question. We have 30. I'll tell you what we find. So we put out an MBR working paper on this, but it's very, it's a very low standard of evidence. So we have 34 data points. So we're running a regression of 34 data points. We look at a few things. So we look at GDP per capita. Richer countries tend to have slightly higher levels of work from home, and it doesn't matter a lot. We look at industrial structure. So do you have more tech and finance? A little bit, but it's not a big deal. We look at population density. So places with more space have more work from home. We look at length of the lockdown. So places with longer lockdowns have higher work from home rates because we've got used to it. Those 4 matter, but they're a little bit. The final one matters more than all the other 4 put together, which is basically culture. So there's a measure, for example, Hofstadter has a measure called individualism. So if you look in the US, the sense is everyone should do what's best for them. I'm the most important person. I'm more important than everyone else. If you go to Asia, it's like, people together, you care about the group and care about others. In the US, I don't know, you hear I'm British, I'm not American, but in the US, there's more of a sense of you can work from home, just get your job done. If you don't, you're in trouble. If you do, you're okay. Asia seems to be more of a culture of you got to be in for the group. There's FaceTime. So my interpretation of what I've heard and what I've seen in the data points towards cultural reasons. But I'll stop. I'm happy for others to suggest other explanations. I don't have particularly strong evidence on this.
I have a suggestion. So I don't know the other East Asian, but in case of Japanese, the Japanese people look at eyes. So they don't trust that, if the person is smiling and saying nice, but they look at eye and then they say, his eye was not laughing, not smiling. So for Japanese, eye contact is very important. And then that's also a reason why Japanese don't, for Japanese, many Japanese, wearing mask is not so disturbing because they can see eyes and then understand what the others are thinking. So in my case, for example, I'm much better at kind of expression using my eyes. So when I have to reject the idea from my colleagues, it is much easier to talk directly in person, not email or Zoom, because with Zoom or Teams, we cannot see the eyes. So when I reject the idea from my colleagues, I want to see their eyes. And then if their eyes are not really, saying they are angry, then I will be very relieved. So I think that it's kind of language or culture, I don't know, but yeah, I think for Japanese, my suggestion or my hypothesis makes sense.
It's great. Thank you very much.
Right. So there's also another question on the fertility discussion. So what about people who are unmarried? Because if they work from home, they have less socialization opportunities. So do companies have to sort of consider when they ask people to come in or not, whether they're married or not? And that's related to fertility, maybe?
It's an interesting question. I was really advocating work from home hybrid. So under hybrid, you're still in typically 3 days a week. So you're probably in enough time to meet coworkers. It's also not, if you're trying to meet other people, it's not totally obvious going in 5 days a week is good. So, you know, if I'm dating, I'm on a dating app and I want to meet people after work, it's probably a lot easier if I don't have to commute for 45 minutes each way. I can probably stop earlier. So you're right that probably being fully remote may be tricky. I wouldn't be surprised if hybrid is actually maybe the easiest to meet a partner. You're in the office 3 days a week, but then you have 2 days a week, particularly Fridays, because almost everyone works from home on Friday. You can meet up a bit earlier or less tired. But I know we haven't looked at that, to be honest. I mean, it's a good question. I just don't have any data on it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's someone had their hand up. Happy to take another question.
Who has the hand
It was
up? Let
me,
me see.
Daniel. It was me.
Oh yeah, go
Daniel.
ahead. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you very much, Nicholas. I think you made a very wonderful presentations. As we were always wondering about whether working from home is better or working from office. But I have a question here. Like we had cases like it was not during the COVID, but pre-COVID, where we were very flexible for people to work from wherever they like, and then after a period it became very difficult to monitor. People were all over the place, and it was very difficult to track down, and nobody knew where the people were working from. But somehow I had access to their credit card statement from the office, and I knew where they were traveling and where they were using the credit cards. So how do we ensure proper monitoring and like that they're actually working? Do you have some evidence on that?
So great question. So the big fear pre-pandemic. So look, I've been working from home for 20 years, and even I didn't think it would be this successful. There's the joke pre-pandemic, the 3 great enemies of work from home are the fridge, the bed, and the television. And most people fall victim to one of those. So everyone thought it's never going to work. They're just going to lie in bed watching TV all day. Turns out, on average, actually, people work pretty well, work from home. I think you do need performance evaluations. So the one place that I'm most nervous about it is the federal government. Take like the US federal government that often has terrible management, just terrible management practices. I worked in the UK government. Actually, I worked in the Treasury and the Department of Trade and Industry, and there were not good performance reviews and underperformance. Nothing happened. They just are in the job forever. That's not the best scenario to be in work from home. So I think you can't basically measure if they're working hard. What you can measure is what they're performing and what they're achieving. So ultimately, imagine I'm a genius and I get my job done in 30 hours a week, maybe that's okay. I'm performing well. So I think that comes back to why we really need to focus on performance. I actually spoke to someone that used to be at IBM that said he figured out a shortcut and produced everything within 25 hours a week, and his bosses were very happy. He said, if they found out I worked 25 hours a week, I'd be angry. And I actually didn't see anything wrong with it, but so you're right. There is a problem. If you're measuring inputs, you can't really do that remotely, which is why you need to really focus to measure output. Also, by the way, I'm not typically advocating fully remote. So I'm an investor in a few startup companies and advising them. And for little startups, fully remote's okay. But as soon as these companies get 25, 50 people, with my own companies, where I have my own money, I like in favor, but at least for part of the managers, to be hybrid. I think it's actually some real value added to having some FaceTime each week. Just not every day. I just don't think you need it every day. Happy to talk for a little. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to take them. I've got a few more slides, but only about 5 minutes.
Yeah. So how about we let you finish your slides and then we go to the Q&A box, because there are so many of them, but some you have actually answered, like whether hybrid working from home enhance diversity, and how to make sure workers don't moonlight, and whether you would want to have fixed hours for hybrid. I think you've answered some of them.
Some of them. These are great questions. So Daniel, I'll go through the rest. It's going to take about 5-6 minutes and I'll come back. So the final bit's kind of economics. It's more like it's kind of interesting, but it's not so much management. So what are 3 impacts on the economy? The first is what's called the donut effect. So this is more of a US thing. is also there. I'll show you some data. I have some data from Tokyo. I can't remember if it's on this slide, but so what's happened is in North America, about 1 million people have left the center of big cities. So when people move to hybrid, if you're, say, working from home 2-3 days a week, you think, look, I can commute further because I only have to go in 2 or 3 days a week. And actually, I'd like a bit of space at home. And so we've seen a huge movement out to the suburbs. Coming back to East Asian cities in particular, this is another benefit from them. These are incredibly congested, dense cities, and allowing people to live out in the suburbs and only come in twice a week, reduce the density in the center and, push where people are living out. So we see New York, San Francisco, Washington, people have moved out. Some of them are up to like 2 hours out, because if you're only coming in 2 days a week, you can put up with a 2-hour commute. This has stopped. People have stopped leaving big cities, but they're not returning. So this looks like it's permanent. We also see it in spending. I have separate data from MasterCard. We look at zip level spending. On the left is San Francisco. On the right is actually 12 large US cities. We have some global data, looks very similar. What you see is because people are now working from home, because they're living in the suburbs, they're spending less money in city centers. So around the world, city centers have seen something like a 5% reduction in spending. So this is the donut effect. As people work from home, they move out from city centers out to the suburbs. For the congested cities, that's actually good. So, here's London, here's global cities, including a number in Asia, in East Asia, South and East Asia. We have about 120 cities who have the MasterCard data from. My co-author is actually Arjun Ramani, is currently the Economist he's one of the Economist journalists actually out in India, interestingly enough. But so we see this is one effect. People have moved out to the suburbs. Second effect is it's easier now for people to live further from work. So this is data from Gusto. They're a big payroll company. So the average American is now living further away from work. Initially, you think that's kind of weird. Are that many people moving away from the office? The answer is no. What's happening? So this is by age. You see people are moving away from work seem to be particularly in their 30s and 40s. This comes back to what I said earlier. People in their 30s and 40s have young kids. They want a bit more space. They live further away. Where's this coming from? It's not really coming from people that already were hired. It's mainly from new hires. So the story is now that I can hire people to come in two days a week, say, I look up to twice as or 2-3 times as far away. If you remember, the area of a circle is pi r squared. If the radius of your search doubles, the area goes up 4-fold. So for firms, it's a big upside in terms of labor supply. So if you think of labor supply, monopsony and monopsonistic competition, this is actually another major benefit, that you just have a much bigger supply of labor to companies. Fact 3 is golf. So I don't know if anyone plays golf. I don't actually play golf. I tried when I was at McKinsey, I tried to learn to play golf, thought it would be useful, but I was just so bad, I had to give up. I just got nowhere. But the number of people that I was talking to during the pandemic that were complaining it was really hard to get a golf game in. So I actually got data on golf. The way this comes from is if you have a car with GPS, even if you don't turn it on, in the US, the GPS is transmitting to the car manufacturer. Say, we have a BMW X5, it's sitting out there and it's transmitting to the manufacturer. They collect it, anonymize it, and sell it on. So we have from INRIX, one of the companies that buys that, millions of journeys every day. And we define in America playing golf as driving to a golf course and spending between 2 to 6 hours there. So that's too long for lunch and it's too short to live there. And Americans never walk, they don't tend to walk anywhere. They definitely don't tend to walk to the golf course. So, you know that they're going to drive there. So what we see is 2019, lots of golf on the weekend, not much in the week. 2022 is basically pretty full all day. Here's hour by hour. 2019, pre-pandemic, people play before work, go into work. 2022, it's pretty full all day. This is August. So in the south of America, it's so hot, you cannot play, think of Texas. Who wants to stand outside in Texas in August? It's like, you melt. So they basically, when I spoke to golf owners, they said it's just maximum, like people are just playing all day, every day. It's completely jammed. I put this up for 2 reasons. One is to point out this is changing peak loading in the economy. So anything that's a leisure activity, think of golf, going to the dentist, going to shopping malls, going to get your hair cut, playing tennis, is now spread throughout the week. Whereas things like offices are crushed into Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So that's one point that this highlights. The second is coming back to what I said earlier. these are probably some of your employees. So like, you know, this isn't like, you know, it's amusing, but every company probably has employees that are out there playing golf, which is why you want performance management. So it's fine if people play golf as long as they work in the evening. It makes a lot of sense. They go play on Tuesday morning because they love golf and they work in the evening as much as they maybe see their kids. But it is, again, why you really want performance evaluation systems. So this is happening. You know, gyms, by the way, gyms are doing really well because gyms are now seeing people using the gym throughout the day, every day, day in, day out. It's all good, but as long as employees get their work done. So what about the future? I wrote a piece in The Economist last year saying in the long run, work from home will go up. The reason is in the long run, technology is getting better. So, you know, I'm on like a small laptop with a camera here, but I've been out in Silicon Valley. I see amazing stuff. So 2 weeks ago, I went to visit a company up in San Francisco that has these things called portals. So they're 8 foot by 8 foot whole walls. And so if I was having a Zoom call, rather than just having my head and my shoulders, you can see from head down to my shoes. And as I walk around, and I was having a conversation with someone in New York, and I could see, you know, I could see she was 5'9", the way she moved. It's kind of like you just feel closer. Like if I bumped into her in the street half an hour later, I'd have recognized her. Whereas on Zoom, it's kind of hard. Holograms, there was a company I went to a venture capital dinner last year. We're having holograms. So all this kind of stuff's getting bigger. As an economist, the reason is market size effects. The market for work from home technology has got about 5 times bigger. So when I talked to Satya Nadella at Microsoft. I had I was about to say a Zoom call. I had a Teams call with him, and he was saying, "Oh, we're spending millions, billions on making better cameras, you know, audio, visual for remote work." So in the long run, if you're to look at say 2030, I think work from home levels will be higher because the technology is going to push it up. And we actually have data for the US going back to 1965, and it was rising for like 50 years up until 2019. So I think it's going to continue to rise. And here's one example. We just look at new patents about work from home, and they started to take off. So, yeah, employers, we put out a piece of Harvard Business Review surveying American employers, and they tend to think work from home will go up. So to conclude, work from home is here to stay. Typically 2 days a week is the kind of standard thing. Monday, Friday, it's like vanilla. I think the big success point is coordinate and focus on performance, and then set up offices to support when people come in, they can socialize and work together. Offices are no longer places to quietly work. They're more places to connect up. And stop. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so reach out on LinkedIn, and I'll stop and go to open Q&A.
Great. Thanks a lot, Nick, for very wonderful talk and also interaction with us throughout your talk. We have about less than 5 minutes left, so maybe I'll just pick one and then maybe 2 questions. So one question is, what have been the main changes in the benefits due to hybrid work? You know, have you seen any changes in companies that have adopted hybrid work sort of formally in the past few years?
I know best Northern Europe. I mean, I'm British, UK, US, Canada. In those markets, it's become completely standard for professionals and managers to be hybrid. I know there are a few investment banks, not many, that are trying to get people back 5 days a week. They are really struggling. I actually have a very good friend that works at one of the famous investment banks. She has 2 young children. She said she's quitting. She's like, they're making me come back 5 days a week. My manager has not been enforcing it, so I've been okay. But now, they've decided to enforce it, and she's actively looking for another job. She's saying, I don't care. I'm fine. I'll take a 5% pay cut. I want to, work from home 2 days a week. So the banks, if you notice, for example, Goldman Sachs has been particularly tough on enforcing 5 days a week. It's not a coincidence, I think, that in the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times have all these stories about Goldman Sachs losing senior female managers. They're having real issues with gender balance. So pretty much 90-something% of companies have gone to hybrid. Okay. Universities. So it's become the norm. I don't think people complain about being asked to come in 3. They're not that happy about 4. They just, they riot. And it's like a revolution if you try and get people to 5. In fact, what happens is it doesn't really happen. So what I hear most of all is they say the CEO said 5 days a week, but each manager is not trying to enforce it because it's just so hard. So then it makes a bit of a mess because then people are kind of coming in and out.
Yeah. What about in terms of the kind of wages and other fringe benefits that employees receive? Has that changed? like they get more like amount of money to set up a working home or something, but maybe
Early
less
on,
salary or something.
no. So companies, I've never had any companies explicitly say we're going to pay you more or less for hybrid. Some do for fully remote. And normally they'll say, well, I can go hire someone in the Philippines or Mexico and Brazil, but that's kind of rare. So no, not normally that. Also, companies don't normally pay. They may pay. I have a desk and I'm actually on a raisy desk. My desk, it was only $600, but if I do this, it's going to go down and go back up again. Stanford paid for my desk and my chair, and it paid like $1,000. But generally, the view is I don't have to commute in every day, so that saves me money. On the other hand, I have to pay for heating and air conditioning if I use it, and food at home. But so normally, company by company, they don't change it. What it happens is it's easier to recruit and retain people. So that's the big driver. So this is why it's become basically a win-win, because employees are happier and firms are more profitable. And so net on both sides, it seemed to be good. I mean, it's pretty rare, by the way. As an economist, it's pretty amazing to be in that situation. And the third group is the kind of society, like pollution is down and parents get to spend more time with kids. As an economist in my lifetime, I've never really come across anything that's so much of like a win-win-win. I mean, there's a few people that lose. So if you own office buildings in cities, you've probably lost some money. But they are typically rich investors that have done very well over the last 10 years. I don't really get upset for big office owning. I mean, whoever owns those things tends to own some equity in bonds, and they've done well on other investments. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So we only have 2 minutes left. Maybe somebody in the ADBI office would like to ask a final question.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. Actually, honestly, I am a little bit confused that regarding the goal effect. It is very interesting. But I think the work from home means that we have to work in the office or at home 5 days a week, right? So during the weekdays, we cannot play golf. We cannot go out. So why you are considering the golf effect in saying the work from home effect?
So people are normally, you're right. So people are normally working 5 days. There is some flexibility. Overall, I mean, the other thing we saw, there's a study from Microsoft that saw a third peak when people work from home. Normally, if you look at activity, it peaks in the morning and peaks in the afternoon. People, if they work from home, their work tends to spread out much more. So you see a third peak in the evening. So there's this thing called the triple peak, whereby you actually see a pickup in working activity at like 7, 8 o'clock. So what it looks like is when people are working from home, they are working a bit less during the day. So they may be going to the gym or maybe playing golf, but they're working more in the evenings. And overall, as we saw in the so in trip.com, they saw the performance was about the same across the two groups. But yes, they change a bit the timing of when they work.
Yeah, it means kind of flexible working time, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly. So again, it depends. Look, if you have to take Zoom calls, you could easily say to employees, you need to be around to take Zoom calls between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. You just don't typically need to be around for all 8 hours. So, for example, today I had some call. Most of my morning was busy. In the afternoon, I had a bit of time off. And it's school holidays now in the US, so I saw my son and my daughter. But yeah, if I had a bunch of calls, you wouldn't do that. But yes, there's more flexibility. It's definitely not complete flexibility. It depends on how you organize it. But typically, there's more.
Okay, so yep. So thank you, Didi, back for the question. We are out of time, so I would like to just close by saying thank you to Nick Bloom for spending the hour with us, and also thank you all for joining us. See you in the next featured speaker webinar.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.